So when did witch become a bad word? Because it wasn't always. In fact, originally, all of these women that are currently called witches sometimes went by different names. They were wise women, they were healers, they were community leaders, and in different cultures and different languages, there were other words for them. Now, we did start calling female people who had special powers and special knowledge witches, but it wasn't always a bad word. It wasn't always a pejorative. Recently, we've started to reclaim the word, but I've noticed that there are still times when people either hesitate to use the word or maybe even whisper it like witch. And that tells me some people still have some baggage about it. So let's talk about where that baggage came from and how to unpack it. Because let me tell you, witch is a very powerful word and you shouldn't be ashamed of it. So let's get into it. I'm Gabby from Mystic Moon Rising, and I'm here to help you on this journey to reclaim your power and to label it the way you want to. All right, so originally we had wise women, healers, all these different women with powers. But when certain patriarchal religions started to gain power, what they needed was for their religion to become the predominant source of power in the culture. And so as you had colonial societies, which originally, the Roman Empire actually came and conquered Great Britain and took over the different societies and cultures and religions that existed there. And one of the ways it did that was it needed its God to be seen as the only God. This is not an uncommon practice, but it is the best example for people to anchor into because you're used to thinking of the British as being colonialists, and it's true. But remember, they were colonized first, and that religion became the predominant religion of the area. And then they went and spread it too, following the pattern that they had originally been a victim of. Not giving them a pass. That is not what this is about. I just want you to know how the process works. And part of that process, again, is making it so that the people who are native to a land adopt the religion of the conquering force. And part of that adoption is to devalue or even demonize the religions or cultural practices that existed in place before the conquering culture or religion came in. So in this case, if you had wise women and healers, not only did the new religions need to be seen as the main functioning power and their God as the only God, what happened is they would adopt some of the cultural practices, which, as you know, is how we get some of the religious holidays to this day in Christianity, is because it absorbed some of the religious holidays that already existed. But when it came to the practitioners of the existing religions, they had to demonize them and make them seem bad or evil, and that their religion was the only true path to salvation or true path to the light. And so that is when they started, labeling these wise women as witches, and when they started these witch hunts. And so long before the Salem witch trials, which is a very famous example of witch hunts, we had a lot of, a lot of Christian ideologists became witch hunters, and witch hunting was kind of a thing. Well, they had to paint witches as the bad guys in order to consolidate power. I mean, that's really what it was about. It was about consolidating power into what they needed to become the dominant religion in the area. And this happened in multiple places, but this example in Great Britain, I think, is really relatable to people, but also helps you understand how it then spread from there to the colonial United States and then turned into the Salem witch trials, because you had this puritanical religion that came over from the UK. You had this pattern of colonizing a place and demonizing any of the practices. But you're also pairing that with a patriarchal society, a patriarchal government, and a patriarchal religion. And so the targets are always women with power in order to solidify the power of these patriarchal practices. And so if you have any women who are defying the traditions of the patriarchy, who are claiming power in their own right, who have knowledge that other people think they shouldn't have, then of course those women must be evil. But remember, it's the structural practice of these religions and governments and societies to say that women with power are evil. And that becomes so pervasive that honestly, it goes beyond the word witch, as we've seen. But witches themselves are not bad. There were a lot of rumors spread and misinformation that witches consort with the devil and things like that. Now, I do want to take a step back really quick, because whenever I talk about witch and witchcraft, people often immediately go to paganism or Wicca. Not all witches are pagans, and not all witches are Wiccans. And so for people to say witches aren't evil because paganism, blah, 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 that's true to an extent. But I do want you to realize that a lot of people claim the word witch who aren't Wiccans and who aren't pagans. Fundamentally, a witch is a woman with power. And if you have any kind of power, someone may use it as a bad word, but it's not a bad word. A woman having power isn't inherently bad. So if you allow someone to convince you that witch is a bad word, or if you allow other people to use witch as a bad word and you don't contest it, you are allowing the belief on some level that women having power is bad. And so specifically reclaiming the word witch is very important, because fundamentally when we do that, we are reclaiming the idea that women have power. And we are fighting against the idea that women having power is bad. This is a deeply revolutionary, in a very quiet way, action. And so for all of you who are out there watching this, who believe in the equality of women, but if you're resisting what I'm saying, that the word isn't bad, I'm challenging you to then ask, where did my belief that the word witch is bad come from? A lot of that is from your religious trauma. So if you are raised in a Western culture, you are usually raised in some form of Christianity. And so even though Christianity doesn't actively participate in witch hunts, there is still a scale of believing witchcraft is bad and associating it with evil and with practices. I do not know any witches who are evil and associating with the dark side. That's very uncommon, to be honest, and that isn't part of most people's practices. But supporting the patriarchy is a big part of most Christian religions. And it got to the point, I'm going to use another famous example, because you're like, Gabby, you're talking about, the old days. Well, that's the origin of this prejudice, which is what it is. But how it shows up in the modern day is, I still know people who won't let their kids watch Harry Potter or read Harry Potter because it's witchcraft and evil, not because J.K. Rowling is a TERF, which she is. I support trans women, just to be very clear about this in this video. But yeah, a lot of people don't let their kids watch things that have to do with witches because they think witchcraft and witches are evil. This is still a common thing that happens in different areas of Christianity, which permeates Western culture. So if you really think about the meaning of the word, that a witch is a woman with some sort of power, the power of knowing, the power of leading, or the power of influencing an outcome. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with women having power? Do you believe there's something wrong with that? If so, you may need to examine that further. If you're watching this video, hopefully you're watching it from the perspective of a woman who wants to reclaim the word or who wants to help educate other people. And if you have religious trauma where you've, come from a Christian background or you were raised with Christian ideas and you've rejected them, I just want you to be aware that a lot of the concepts and frameworks they teach you along the way are very pervasive in terms of how your worldview is framed. And so leaving Christianity, if you've left Christianity, isn't always enough. A lot of times you have to question some of the deeply ingrained beliefs about women, about women's roles, about the words we use, and about the implications of women with power. Because so many former Christians are like, absolutely, I believe women are equal, but they whisper the word witch. Well, what do you think that means? Who do you think demonized the witches? It was the priests who wanted to hold on to power, or if you go back far enough, to get power by pushing down women and taking power away from them. This is where it came from. And what it looks like now is, again, holding on to power by keeping it away from women. Because if women can have power, then people who are still in these religions start to question, well, what else is being incorrectly taught in this religion? And so that's why this is like the hardest thing to let go of, and the thing that the church holds on to the most tightly. We don't have a female pope. I'm not Catholic, but I'm just using examples, that the major Christian religions, I don't care what they say. Mormon religion, there's no female prophet. Like, the men are in power. Don't get it twisted. And they will give the women little jobs with small authority. And that's it at best. They will never be equal in that church. And that is a fundamental disconnect with how our society is moving forward, and why they're trying so hard to hold on to power culturally, politically, and in religion. So one of the most subversive things you can do as a woman is stand up and claim your power. And one of the best ways you can do that is to reclaim this word. It's okay if you don't personally identify with this word. I don't think everybody who's a woman in power has to identify as a witch. A lot of times people are energy workers or they are seers. To me, fundamentally, like, the point at which you're really a witch is if you are influencing the outcome. Are you influencing the energy of the world, or are you simply perceiving it? Now, you can call yourself a witch if you are a seer or an energy worker. There's nothing wrong with that. But you're definitely a witch if you're changing something, because that's what witches do. You are changing things through your actions, manifesting, etc. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. If you think there's something wrong with exerting influence on the world as a woman, then that is an ingrained belief that I suggest that you examine and unpack. And if you're not quite there, that's okay. This video is just a starting point to get you to think about it, to examine your thoughts and beliefs, or how to have a conversation with somebody else who needs to do the same thing. But I am going to ask for a little bit of respect for the word, because women have fought very hard to be seen and be respected in this world. And many of us are fighting to be able to use and claim our power and not be rejected and demonized, and dealing with the consequences of having done so. And so if you are a woman watching this video and you're not quite comfortable with that word, I'm just going to ask for the respect of not saying it like it's a bad word, because it isn't. And if I call myself a witch and you act like that's a bad word, I want you to know I'm not okay with you, because you are clearly not okay with me. And that might be a little bit challenging, but fundamentally that's what you're saying. I'm telling you, this is the path that I'm walking. And if you act like that's a bad word, I'd prefer that you have a conversation with me about that. But first, I would prefer that you examine where your own belief comes from. What unhealed wound do you have about your femininity, about feminine power, about your own power, about messages you've gotten? Because leaving the church, like I said, isn't enough. You have to heal what was done. You have to unlearn the things that they taught you. And you have to recognize that this is one of the hardest things for a lot of people to let go of. For some reason, it's deep. The church has worked very hard to make sure it's deep. That's kind of my next challenge question. Are you going to let them win? If you left the church, are you going to let them win by continuing to suppress women's power? Because that's what you're doing if you let this continue being a bad word. Because the fact that it's a bad word means that someone's taught you it's a bad idea and a bad concept, and it isn't. There's nothing wrong with women having power. You don't need to be scared of it just because you were raised in a patriarchal religion that is deathly afraid of it, because they are. Because they know that the world will change when the women fully reclaim our power. That's what the divine female awakening is all about. And so I have been called to make this video because I believe in the divine feminine awakening. I believe that the goddesses are awakening, and they are talking to us, and they are telling us it is time for us to step into our power. And sometimes it starts with words, and sometimes it starts with actions. But we need to be very clear that there's nothing wrong with women having power, and that anybody who tells us there's something wrong with it, we need to be examining where they're coming from, right? So I'd love to hear different perspectives. If you respectfully disagree, please put that in the comments. If you have things to add, please put that in the comments. There are so many ways that modern women are showing up in witchcraft and as witches. And that was the other point of this video, is that it's not just about paganism and it's not just about Wicca. And a lot of people I talk to who, I tell them what I do, they immediately jump to that. And those are not how I identify. How can we get to a place of dialogue and understanding about the different paths we're walking? And if you're watching this video, I'd love to know what path you're on as well. All right. I just want to close with this thought that the word witch was stolen from us. And I've talked about a few ideas about how we can take it back and why I think that's so important. But I'd love to hear from you as well in terms of, how do you think we can take it back? How can we reclaim this word? Because words have power, as we know. So yeah, thanks for watching.